Good evening. Thank you for coming. This is going to be the first of a two-session interview for the superintendent candidates of the Spencer-East Brookfield Regional School District. Tonight we have the pleasure of having Michael Bonacani, who is the superintendent for Mohawk Regional School District out in the western part of the state. Tomorrow night, at the same time for meet and greet and for interviews, will be Nancy Crow, Deputy Superintendent from the Pittsfield School System out in Western Mass. So we have two candidates, both from Western Mass, coming to us via the Mass Pike, right, Mike? The format tonight is going to be Mike will do a brief introduction of himself, and then I will recognize each one of the school committee candidates that are seated down in the front row. They will ask questions, and they will be allowed any follow-up questions after Mr. Bonacani responds. And then we have some questions that have been sent to the chair via the public through emails. When we end that process, I'll give the board one more opportunity to ask any other questions that may have come to mind after they've heard the responses from Mr. Bonacani. And likewise, I'll give Mr. Bonacani an opportunity to give a closing statement, if you will, to make sure that he's made his position clear and has put his best foot forward. So having said that, give me help and a warm welcome for Mike Bonacani. Michael?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm very impressed. My name was spelled correctly. That doesn't happen very often. I'm delighted to be here. I really do appreciate the opportunity. I do understand that there's a lot going on in this district. There's much work to be done. I want to thank the school committee members for stepping up to this, because there's no question that the school committee needs to be a partner in getting things on track. So thank you for that. A little bit about me personally. My wife and I have two children. My son just graduated from high school. He was one of my students. I had the pleasure of giving him his diploma, which was a great experience. My daughter is 12 years old in 7th grade. Professionally, I've been a superintendent of schools for 10 years for the same school district, for Mohawk Trail Regional in the western part of the state. It's a regional school district, so it has a similar structure to what Spencer-East Brookfield has. And I'm sitting here today because in many ways Mohawk was in a similar state that Spencer is in today. It was a district in great distress. Finances, there were big problems with finances. There were unsettled teachers' contracts. There were absences of structures to support educators. And a lot of people that really wanted to do the right thing to take care of their schools, and there was a lot of pride there. And so I began a journey for 10 years working for the district to help bring some stability, to get the finances under control, to bring transparency to budgeting, to have operating statements that local town officials could believe in, to have disciplined budgets, to operate on budget, and to not have overruns. And we moved toward the classroom and started to put in place the right principles and the right buildings for longer-term type contracts, so there was a lot of stability brought with the leadership. And then there's the work, obviously, with the teachers to set up curriculum instruction, assessment systems, all the work that needs to go into supporting the educators. And so 10 years later, Mohawk has moved from being the equivalent of a level 3, a district in distress, to a level 2, a strong level 2 district with a couple of our elementary schools who are now level 1, another one that's on the verge of level 1, but a very healthy organization. So now if you come to school committee meetings at Mohawk, which is much different than it was 10 years ago, the conversations are in the right place. It's all about educating kids. And so I see a lot of similarities happening here, and I'm ready for a new challenge. I'm one of these people that really likes a challenge. I want to really make a huge contribution in everything that I do, and I feel like this is a wonderful opportunity. And I have an awful lot of ideas about how to do that. I read through the district review report, which is pretty extensive, but I expect to refer to an awful lot of this material as we talk more, so I'll hold off on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike, and we're going to get to some of those ideas hopefully tonight as we go through with questions. Our first questions tonight will come from Kurt Nordquist. He's a senior member of the board. Kurt, you can ask your questions, and if you would like any follow-up after Mr. Bonacani responds, I'll give you that opportunity.
Mr. Chairman, is it 2 questions or 3 or whatever?
Whatever you have,
Okay.
Go ahead with them.
Thank you, thank you. My first question is, I put down, why our districts? What about our district interest that makes you want to come here? What about our district interest that makes you want to come here?
Because it looks an awful lot like the district that I'm currently serving 10 years ago. And I feel like I learned how to be a superintendent going through that fire. It's a hard thing to take on a distressed district and learn the job at the same time. Now I've got 10 years of experience and been through an awful lot of all the details that are involved in running a complex school district. So I feel like, for me, Kurt, I feel like I'm the right person at the right place at the right time to make a difference here.
Okay, and my other question on that same idea, how would you describe the financial condition in this district and what's your ideas to move it forward besides an override? I mean,
Well, the first piece, I think, is to bring some credibility to numbers. Now, I'm assuming that an awful lot of work has been done recently to deal with the recent issues that have gone on here. But before you can begin to establish trust with all the constituents, people have to believe the numbers. If they think you're playing shell games with money, you're never going to get beyond first base. So the district needs a business administrator. The business administrator needs to be an exceptionally capable person. That person, in my history, has been just one of my key partners because my ability to serve as a superintendent, my ability to deliver education to kids, it's tied to money. There's just no way around that. So having a very strong business administrator, setting up good transparent systems, regular reporting structures to school committee, we're not hiding anything, starts to build some credibility, and you have to work on it one relationship at a time. And as you're doing that, as you're building some credibility and trust about what the needs of the kids are, you have to request what the needs are. And I understand that this is complicated, and I get the money piece. We have to live within our means. We have to live with what the taxpayers can support, but we also need to ask for what the educators need to serve the children.
well, my last question is, what experience do you have in developing programs to bring students back to the district?
Well, I'm coming from a school district that has been experiencing significant enrollment decline. And most of the school districts in the Commonwealth are going through enrollment decline because the population is going down. So this is a part of the job that I've had to pay attention to for a long, long time. And we've tried a number of different things, but I'll tell you what has really worked the best to retain and bring kids back, and that's having healthy schools. If you have strong schools, the parents know about that, and the parents decide to keep their children in those schools, or people that might go to private school or might choose some other alternative or school choice out, they have a reason to go into that school. So that's really the strategy that I advocate, is we have to make our schools as strong as they can be. The numbers will sort themselves out. There aren't any gimmicks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Kurt. Our next questions will come from Angela Napkin. By the way, as members ask questions, if the other members, if you have any follow-up question or something you'd like the candidate to expand on, feel free to ask to be recognized. Angela.
Thank you. Welcome, Mike. My first question is, what do you think that your priority should be for the first 60 days after you become superintendent?
Well, this work is not done sort of sequentially. You have to do all of this work concurrently. But one of the initial things that must happen is I'd have to be visible pretty much everywhere. I need to shake a lot of hands and introduce myself to all the key stakeholders. I would likely be at the schools greeting kids coming in the morning and being there in the afternoon as they're leaving. But being visible is going to be a major issue. But meanwhile, the work has to happen. I'd like to think that I would participate in the hiring of a business administrator. There's a ton of financial work that needs to be done, and begin to set up those structures. It will likely take 60 days just to go through the process of finding the right person before we would even get into those details. And of course, I need to really understand what's happening in the schools. I need to get with the administrative team. I need to understand exactly where the curriculum is. How are we doing with educator evaluation? What kind of assessment systems do we have in place? I know there's pieces of a lot of these things, having read through the review. what it looks to me, it's not systemic right now. So I'd have to get a handle on all those things. And meanwhile, the budget is due pretty soon, right? So we're preparing our budget now where I am. We need to have that budget really kind of done by December. So preparing for next year's budget would also be a very high priority. And in order to figure out what our needs are, I'd have to be out there talking to people.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
My second question is, have you worked to develop school committee goals and district goals, and how would you go about that here?
Yes. The school committee really, in my view, we need to work with our school committees just like we work with our educators. You folks need to have professional development, and you need to have people that are helping you evolve in your skills. You come from a variety of walks of life, and believe me, a school system is a complex animal. And to expect school committee members, unless you've been on school committee for like 10 years or so, understanding the budget is really a huge challenge. So ongoing professional development for school committee really should be happening. But as far as the district improvement plan, was that the other question that you asked?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've owned that responsibility in my district. That's the beginning of aligning systems together. If you have a district improvement plan that's not aligned with what the school committee wants to accomplish, that's not aligned with your school improvement plans, you've got people going in different directions. So the district improvement plan, which I advocate, really, I've aligned it to the district standards and indicators. It's the way that Spencer East Brookfield was evaluated back in 2013. And you go through those different pieces, that's how I've got it framed. And that's really proven to be a really good structure, a comprehensive structure to get organized. And then it's within those 6 major standards that we're working on together, you can start to actually put together a management tool to make changes. But it's a multi-year project.
And then my final question, what have you learned from each step in your career path that you think has helped you to become the type of superintendent our district should choose?
This job is not boring. There's always something going on, and sometimes it can be really unpleasant. But the work is what sustains at least me over time, and taking care of children is a part of me that I just have to do. So my evolution over time, I started with dealing really heavily with finances and the money and that whole part of the business. But I've really gravitated toward understanding all the constituents that are involved, and that actually we all really want the best for our kids, even though we have some pretty contentious and difficult conversations between various groups. When you sit people down and have relationships with them, and over 10 years I'm able to do that. I can walk through my district now and I know everybody by first name, and I can have conversations with them. That has enabled me to really understand that people are really motivated to do the right thing. And so what I have to work really hard at is facilitating environments where you can have constructive conversations about difficult topics. And I think that is a major need in this district right now, to be able to have those kinds of conversations rather than getting too caught up in drama.
Thank you.
All set, Angela? Thank you. Our next questions will come from Mike Ethier.
Nice to meet you, sir. My first question for you would be, how would you deal with a problem in which opinions were polarized? What would you do? How would you make a plan? And what did you learn?
Well, a process for solving problems that I've used for a long, long time, whether it's involving 2 people or involving a much larger group of people, is I get people in the room at the same time. And we have a civil and respectful conversation about what are the problems that we're really dealing with here. And we stay on point. And that works in contract negotiations as well. So even if things can be very contentious in that kind of environment, you have to back up and see people as human beings, assume the best, and have civil dialogue, and you can get there.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Give us an example of a time you made a proposal that was strongly opposed in a public forum. How did you deal with it at the forum and afterward?
Well, this wasn't a proposal, but when I first became a superintendent 10 years ago, one of the things that I was charged with doing was looking at consolidation of schools. As you might imagine, closing elementary schools tends to get parents upset. So I went through a number of public meetings, listening to folks talk about how important their schools were, and regardless of what the money issues were, that they cared about their schools and wanted to retain those schools. And in the end, no elementary schools were closed in the district. And what I learned from that was really just a deeper understanding that, at least in my neck of the woods, and politics are all local, so you have to understand what's motivating people locally. But in rural environments, elementary schools are more than just a school. They're the heart and soul of the community. And so I understood that. So my reaction to that was I focused and convinced my school committee members to allow me to work on operating the most efficient school district possible so that we could keep everything that everybody wanted. And we did a number of things over time, but we did things like bring in additional pothole money. We changed our health insurance, which structurally saved us about $1 million. There were a number of internal organizational things. We had an inordinate number of part-time employees that tend to be very expensive, and so we focused more on having full-time employees. Those are more cost-effective and happier employees anyways, generally. So I focused my efforts on all of those types of efforts, which ultimately we've been able to keep it going and do well.
Thank you. And I have one last one for you. What criteria do you use in selecting the members of your administration team? What are the key elements of character or experience you would look for?
I have hired a good number of principals over the years. I have currently 5 principals, 6. They are a cross-section. In my case, I do look for younger talent where I am because of money issues. The district could not afford really experienced principals to bring on board. So one of the things that I became pretty skilled at was looking into the teacher ranks and identifying talented people within the schools who understood a lot of what was going on. And I mentored and groomed those people and brought them into administration. And those folks are also, they tend to be committed to the district and want to stick around. And that's another really important issue with principals, is you have turnover. As you know here, if you have superintendent turnover and you have principal turnover, that's not a good thing for the teachers. So what this has evolved to over time is I've got principals on long-term types of contracts, 5-year contracts. More of them are first-time principals than not first-time principals. So I look for, you asked for some of the qualities. I like people that can figure it out.
Yeah.
Now that's pretty vague, but that I need people who are extremely resourceful, that I can put into difficult situations and trust that they're going to use the right set of criteria to make judgment calls, and that they're going to learn very quickly, and they'll offset whatever they might lack in experience, they'll offset in that kind of a work ethic. And that's proved to be actually really good.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mike. Our next questions will come from Ms. Heather Messier.
Good evening.
Good evening, Heather.
Across the different levels of the district, describe how you will know whether professional development programs and initiatives have affected the knowledge, skills, and practices of educators in the district. And how would you hold educators at all levels, pre-K to 12, accountable to delivering effective instruction?
Right. Well, all you have to do is look at the MCAS data, and you can get a sense of where the district, how the district is performing school by school, at least in your ELA, math, and your science. Beyond that, if there are if they're using DIBELS, I think is being used here, and I think that the MAP program is being used. Whatever internal assessment systems are being used, I'd want to look at those as well to see where the kids are. But even taking a step back from that point, I have to share that one of the key things that was missing in my school district that I had to bring was to have somebody who was a devoted curriculum and assessment person. That can be a curriculum coordinator, it can be a director of curriculum and assessment, which is what I have in my district. But I found that the principals simply had too much to do running their buildings to be able to do that work as well, and that if you asked teachers to do it part-time or on a stipend basis, they just could not get to the quality that you're really looking for. So I'm worried out of the gates whether there's a need for that kind of a person to provide some support for the teachers, because before you can really hold the teachers accountable, and I understand that, Eval, and I get all of those pieces, I'm more concerned about providing the systems of support that they need to be successful. So I'd want to make sure that those systems are in place, and of course, once those systems are in place, then educator evaluation, if implemented properly, can be a very constructive way of helping our people be the best they can be and hold them accountable.
Okay. As you somewhat noted, we currently have 3 schools in a level 3 status based on MCAS scores. How would you develop district-wide capacity to assess, analyze, and monitor student performance? I guess you kind of already answered that, but maybe you can elaborate.
Right. In my case, I ended up with a pre-K to 6 curriculum coordinator and a 7 through 12 because there was so much work that needed to be done. Now, the pre-K to 6 director is out in the schools pretty much working as a coach with teachers, holding grade level meetings and vertical meetings periodically. You have to back up to the schedule as well when we're talking about helping. I'm sorry, could the question one more time?
Okay. How would you develop district-wide capacity to assess, analyze, and monitor performance? Sorry.
Is that me making that noise? So the assessment we talked about, looking at the measures, monitoring the performance, gets back to the systems that I was just talking about. I think there's pockets of those systems in place here, but they're not in there comprehensively, and that's where we get back to having these human resources that provide scale to support the teachers, whether it's 1 or 2 curriculum coordinators. That's their responsibility, is to be out there helping the teachers learn how to use data to actually drive instruction, and that's work that needs to happen on a day-to-day basis. It can't be just an in-service twice a year, and where I was going with this is, in my case, we also, you have to make the school calendar provide time. Time is a constant thing. It's not just, money is always an issue that people get, but time is really the area that educators struggle the most with. How do I get time to collaborate with my colleague on X so that I can work on this particular skill set? So in our case, we've landed on a model where we have professional learning days. We're very specific about this now. It's been a cultural shift. We don't have half days. We have professional learning days. And it's all designed about helping our teachers have consistent training on a weekly basis, because we do this every week. So you have to have that consistency as well. So you got to have some support from central office. You have to have the time. And then you have to stay organized and focused.
Okay. What is your experience with special education? What programs or interventions have you established that have helped the special education department in your district run more efficiently to deliver the best possible services?
We have a pretty high special needs population in our district, and we've been through several coordinated program reviews. The special needs area was not in good shape when I originally started at Mohawk, so this was one of the areas we had to work on. You know, it starts with your director of pupil personnel services. You got to have a very capable person in that role. So if you have somebody who's very capable in that role, then you're getting into actual operations. In our case, we moved with the response to intervention model, which we use, frankly, as a tiered instructional model for all of the bands of kids, not just with our special needs students. We're also now moving into behavioral interventions. I'm really excited about, we're using PBIS, which is a positive behavioral intervention system, in 2 of our schools this year. And we use a responsive classroom methodology in our elementary schools as well. So we're paying close attention to the social emotional development of our children, which is particularly important with our special needs population.
Okay. In what ways have you looked at ways to contain costs while balancing the needs of students in terms of special education? I know it gets tricky.
Yeah, the special needs part of the budget. One thing that I'm really careful about that which I've seen happen, which is not a good thing. It's when you have regular ed pitted against special ed. These are all our kids, whether they're special needs or regular ed students. And as we know in the special needs world, we have to be prepared for out-of-district placements that might cost $80,000, $90,000. That's just part of the world that we have to live in. But what we did was we focused on our IEP process. We made sure we were very consistent about our IEP plans and that we were providing the services that the kids really needed. I did discover that we were providing an awful lot of services that just really weren't necessary and really weren't helping the children at the end of the day. So we cleaned up our IEP process. We were consistent about that school to school. And then once we sort of had our baseline of this is our student, our population, these are the service grids, I stopped fluctuating with the paraprofessional support. I understand it's more expensive to support that part of what we do, but it's necessary. So I kind of understand what we need, and we have to stay on top of the financial issues all the time to be prepared to deal with curveballs that come along. And it's worked out fine.
Our district has 5 schools in 5 different locations. How would you make yourself readily available to all of our schools on a consistent basis? How would you organize your time to be sure each school receives equal attention?
Sure. So my current school district is 250 square miles, which is the largest geographic district in the state. What I like to tell people is if you took the 10 largest school districts and put them all together, Springfield, Boston, Worcester, Brockton, et cetera, we're bigger. That's our claim to fame. So I have to plan my time very carefully. I put 40 to 50,000 miles a year on my car because I'm on the road. And I understand how much of our work is actually accomplished by talking to people one-to-one. So how would I do that? There's a number of ways to do it. I like to greet the kids when they're coming into school. So, I mean, I would consult with Martha. She's out there to just understand how things have been done in the past. But starting my day at a different school, there's 5 schools, right? So that's a Monday through Friday schedule right there, starting a day at each of the different schools, greeting the kids coming into school, then maybe spending some time inside the building. It's those kinds of things that I can do. What I cannot do is allow myself to be trapped in central office in front of my computer all the time. I'm very mindful of not letting that happen.
Okay, good to hear. How would you encourage more collaboration between our schools and our towns?
Well, I think the financial instruments are a great place to start. I mean, if there are issues around the finances, there's a budget proposal that needs to be worked on now. So the preparation of the budget in itself is a great opportunity to connect with finance committee members and select boards from the towns, to let those folks know where we are in the preparation of the budget, get a sense from them what they think they can support. So instead of maybe unveiling, I don't know what the process is here, but rather than waiting for a particular day in January or February perhaps to present the budget, it's a more iterative process that people are aware of before the final product comes forward. I think that kind of a process can help break down an awful lot of barriers and begin to build some trust. And that's a good place to start with the towns.
And then finally, what are your views on the park assessment? What has your district decided to do this year, and what are your opinions on that?
Well, we decided to stay with MCAS for this year, and we know that we're going to go to park. We know that that's the direction that we're heading, and I think that the park system will be fine. I'm generally very protective of my kids, and I don't think that the state is ready, as it hasn't been ready in many of the other initiatives that have come down the pike to make that transition just yet in a seamless way. For example, we can't compare park data to MCAS data, so there alone, our educators would not be able to track student growth from year to year, and that was really the deal breaker to me. And when the park system is ready and mandated, we'll make the move then, but right now it's not the right thing for the kids.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I'll go next, and then Mr. Clutie will go last. Mike, you certainly have a non-traditional background in that you didn't come up through the educational ranks. How would you put your years of military service and MBA background to use to improve the organizational culture and performance of the district?
That's why I was originally hired as a superintendent, and why my background is a little bit strange. I taught, and then I was an IT director, and then I became a superintendent. So if you look at that, it doesn't seem to make an awful lot of sense. But my training in the military, one thing about the Air Force and the military in general is that we have resources to train people on leadership and organizational leadership and management, which the private sector and the public sector in particular tend to not have those types of skills. And it doesn't always have to be in a dramatic situation such as being at war. It's something that we do routinely in peacetime. And those skills that I've learned and continue to learn serving in the Air Force have been enormously transferable to a school district. So just the concept of chain of command and being able to recognize those moments and to teach those moments to people can bring a ton of improvement in operations. So instead of perhaps having a parent who's upset about something come to the superintendent's office or to the school committee chair, we can condition people over time to solve problems at the lowest level, and that's what it's all about. So you talk to that parent. Have you talked with the teacher? Have you talked to the teacher more than once? And then have you talked with the principal more than once? And then you work your way up the chain. So it's learning that kind of discipline around organizations that can save people's time and give people ownership where they need to have it, because everybody wants to solve their area of the puzzle on their own. You know, they don't want to have somebody come in. My principals don't want me coming in to tell them how to fix problems. And I look for people that can solve problems anyways, so I want them to be able to take care of their area of responsibility. As far as the MBA is concerned, I worked in the private sector and did an awful lot of spreadsheet work, and that prepared me as well as you could be prepared for a school budget without actually doing a school budget. But I'm an expert in Excel, so.
Thank you. Since you mentioned technology, what are your priorities for the foundation of a successful school district, and where does technology fit in that?
Yeah. I really like the structure that the state uses to look at us. So leadership and governance, I'm just going to give you just some quick talking points here. So under leadership and governance, that's an area where I would focus on developing professional learning communities inside this district. And that's all about delegating leadership and authority to the lowest level possible. I'd also be working very hard on bringing in a good, stable group of administrators and having them on longer-term contracts. You need that stability to do this work. Under curriculum instruction and assessment, again, I'm worried about the need for a curriculum coordinator in the district. Under human resources and PD, the teacher's contract is an issue. The DIP and the SIPs need to be aligned. There should be a technology improvement plan as well, so that instrument should be there. And I would prioritize professional development inside the budget. Under student support, I don't know if you folks are doing RTI here. I'm looking at you. Do you have the answer? No? Is Karen out there? Are you guys doing RTI?
We've been trained in response to intervention over the past couple of years, and we've implemented it. As you know, RTI is a regular ed, not a special ed function. So in response to that, we are implementing RTI to the best of our ability. However, we recognize that RTI we were missing the core curriculum being aligned. That being stated, we stopped doing the RTI process because I would hope that you can't do that with integrity unless you have an aligned curriculum.
Right.
We transferred that skill set over our energies over to the professional development in the area of aligning our core curriculum to be able to better utilize the RTI model in the district. So the short answer is, no, we're not using it to the best of our ability, but yes, we've been trained and we have an awareness and we're doing it the best we can while we're aligning our curriculum.
Okay, thank you. I would be looking at our tiered models, including RTI, positive behavioral intervention and supports the behavioral issues that we talked about earlier. And I'd be looking at parent engagement as well. I don't know the types of structures that are in place now. We've implemented something called community conversations, which is when there is a difficult topic that people want to talk about, we post it publicly, we invite people to come in, and we have a conversation about it. It's a way to have one-to-one dialogue. A tool that a technology piece that I've brought into Mohawk is something called Let's Talk. If you were to go to the website, you would see on the front page of the district page and all the school pages a square that says Let's Talk. It's an electronic tool that's designed for whatever school stakeholder who happens to have an issue with the school district can go there, and there's a series of ways to communicate whatever's on their mind, and if they want a response, then you can ask for the response. If you don't want a response, you just want to share, that's fine too. But it's a way to facilitate dialogue with the community, and the parents in particular. And lastly, under finance and asset management, we talked about the business administrator position. That's critical. A business administrator who's got experience in a regional school district I think is absolutely essential. Operational transparency, working on the budget together, and the regular reporting about the operating statements so that people really know month to month, where are we, how are we doing?
Thank you, Mike. You mentioned professional learning communities. Talk to me about how they enhance professional development and how they improve the overall delivery of service.
Well, professional learning communities essentially are you're setting up subgroups of educators to work on particular topics, and you follow specific protocols to use your time really efficiently. I struggled for years with administrative council meetings that would last for 4 hours, and that's just shouldn't be happening. So by using professional learning communities, it's a way to get people together on a complex issue and everybody gets some input, and then at the end of the conversation, you're building toward a decision of some sort. Sometimes you can get it done in one meeting. Usually the work is done over time. But it delegates responsibility and spreads out authority. So that's now happening in our schools, and where we are now is the administrators have become proficient at it, and now the teachers are taking over inside the schools. So it's still a work in progress, but the educators have really grasped it.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned in your packet about learning walkthroughs. Can you explain to me what those are and how those help to improve the delivery of service to the students?
That's another structure designed to support the educators. It is a non-evaluative model where we bring together a number of educators to do literally a walkthrough through a school, looking at a very particular issue that they've talked about ahead of time. And so they walk through the school, they collect their evidence, they get together and debrief on whatever it is they were looking at. Our learning objectives, for example, visible inside the classrooms. Do the kids know what they're supposed to be learning in a lesson? They debrief on whatever the issue is, and then that data is used as part of a continual improvement process. It's used to further, it's part of the school improvement plan, it becomes part of the professional development plan. All of these pieces are connected. And a learning walkthrough is a helpful structure.
Yep. Thank you. Where does tiered instruction fit into your educational philosophy?
Well, it's differentiated instruction. It's just a different way of saying differentiated instruction, which is all about tailoring to the needs of the student. I think it's hard to find any educator that doesn't believe strongly in tailoring the education to the individual student's needs. I mean, it's really kind of a benchmark core value.
You mentioned stakeholders. Could you give us some examples of how you would involve community stakeholders, the parents, the taxpayers, the elected officials, in supporting your vision on how you will take us to a level of acceptable performance within the district?
I think an awful lot of communications are going to have to happen beyond 60 days. It's just going to be part of the need for ongoing into the future. So similar to, we talked about the district, the budgeting process and how that can be used to develop some trust between the town officials. That can also be used with the various stakeholders. And so you can have periodic presentations to check in on how you're doing there, but even the development. One of the things I read in the district plan was the creation of a vision statement for the district, and I wasn't able to find out if that actually happened. But if it hasn't happened, creating a vision statement is also another vehicle to bring people in and to get people's ideas and to come up with some sort of a plan. Where do we want to go? And then beyond that, getting into the district improvement plan, that's a vehicle that I've used for a long time, not just to report to the school committee, but it's a way to also stay connected with the educators and other people that come to our meetings. We cross-reference my updates on the district improvement plan come from throughout the district, so I have to have relationships with everybody to do that.
Thanks. How do you handle grants in the district that you're in now? Do all grants come to you as superintendent? Do they go to the school committee to sign off? What's the procedure? Do you have a grants person, or do you just assign them to different departments?
Yeah, I currently assign different grants to different people, but grants are accepted by the school committee. So when we prepare the budget, we also have a column that we add that shows the grants as well. So it's not just the town assessment and the revenues from the state, but the grants, so that the school committee can understand what's actually really in the budget. And another layer that we've been working on is, for transparency, is adding in all of the donations that come in, so that you can really see the investment that's coming from the community.
Okay. Thanks. If you have any experience with block scheduling, what's your position on it? And if you have you done anything to improve block scheduling?
Well, we have a 4x4 block schedule where I am now, and we struggled with providing additional supports for high school students, and in the 4x4 block schedule makes it difficult to do that. So what we did do was, this is an example of working with educators on a difficult topic, because changing the high school schedule is obviously a negotiable issue. But we introduced something that is called an expanded learning opportunity block. It's a short block. And we've been doing that now for 2 years, and we're still evolving it, but it is fundamentally giving us what we hoped it would give us, which is an opportunity for high school students who need extra help to be able to go see an educator and get that time.
Thank you. My last question, and then I'll give you a couple that have come from the community, but as a superintendent, what do you see our role as the school committee?
Well, the school committee is a huge partner in this whole process. You know, this is one big team, if we're just going to analogize it to that. It's critical. The superintendent has to, the school committee you're in charge of budget and policy. I mean, you have that governance control. But we have to work with each other. And so your role is, I mean, you're doing an awful lot of oversight. I think school districts have just become much more complex animals over the past 10 years or so. It's just not like it used to be in the old days, I think, where you had people just do their thing and they were by themselves. So it would be essential in my mind that I'd be working aggressively on communications with school committee on issues that are happening, because you guys know the community better than I do at this point, and you certainly have an awful lot to add, and you can provide some insight on issues as they're unfolding. But fundamentally, you're a critical partner. If you don't have a good relationship between your school committee and your administration, you've got a big problem inside the family.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you a few questions from residents that were sent to me by way of emails. One is, what is your opinion of Common Core?
Well, the Common Core is essentially, those are our learning standards that have been adopted. Those are what we are held accountable in our annual testing with the state. So they are our learning standards, and that's what we map. That's what we're mapping our curriculum to, our instruction to, our assessment to. So whether you call it the Common Core or our frameworks, they are our learning standards, and they're not optional. That's the work that we need to do.
The follow-up question to that from this resident is, if you find that the Common Core is not working in the district and is hurting our children, what steps would you take?
It's hard for me to imagine how learning standards would somehow not be good for our students' education. So this is a bit theoretical. So I guess what I'll say is, let me look at it a different way. I'm a steward as a superintendent for the school district, a steward for the children, for the teachers, for the school committee, for everybody. So for example, last year, in our second year of working on educator evaluation, I found that we weren't consistently abiding by everything that was in the contract. Now, at the end of the day, we want an educator evaluation system that helps our teachers develop the skills to be outstanding educators in the classroom. And that's where the focus of developing educator evaluation needs to be. So in this case, what I advocated is that we use it as a trust-building opportunity. And the state was not gung-ho about this, but basically I advocated to the state that we're not going to evaluate the teachers this year. We're going to take everything that we learned and we're going to use that to develop to go into the next year. And we'll get it right next year. But we're not going to comply for the sake of complying if it doesn't make sense for our kids, which I think gets at what the question is all about.
Okay, thanks. Another resident's question is, what is your vision of a K through 12 curriculum that is fully integrated with technology, i.e. smart boards in the classroom to supplement education?
Yeah. So I have a background. I basically operate as the IT director of my district now. So this is an area that I have a lot of personal interest in. I like technology, I guess, maybe more than the next person. But the education of the children is the part that needs to come first. So I'm not a proponent of let's give every kid a laptop, let's give every teacher a smart board. What I am a proponent of is we do have to have the infrastructure. So having servers in all of our buildings that can talk to each other, having fiber optic was a big deal in our part of the state, having that hooked up, and we got that done. And having robust Wi-Fi in all the buildings was also critical for us. Beyond that, getting into the use of instruction for the education of the children, I'm more inclined to let the teachers experiment with different uses of technology, and when what works, then we can spread those best practices. But I'm not interested in top-down approaches. So if I have a teacher who comes to me who has an interesting idea, and this happens regularly, I had one that needed a laptop cart with 20 laptops, and had a very specific application on how this was going to go. Those are the kinds of things that I can get behind.
Thank you. At this point, we'll go to Mr. Vinnie Cludier for questions.
Good evening. I'm going to ask some different questions, and you can answer these whether it be from your personal life or from your professional, okay? As you see yourself, what do you see one of your greatest strengths? And likewise, where do you see one of your greatest growth opportunities?
Okay. A lot of times, our areas of strength are also our greatest growth opportunities. I think like a lot of educators, I have a hero complex, and I want to use my time to make a difference on the planet. And I serve in uniform as well as serving as a superintendent of schools because I want to make a difference for the country, I want to make a difference for the kids. And over the course of my life, I've developed, I think, a pretty strong set of leadership skills, and I operate pretty well under fire. Pressure situations I've generally done well in. So I'm sitting here today because I see a situation where there's a lot of work that needs to be done. It's a district in distress. And it doesn't necessarily have the drama of a fire, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And so I see that as an area of strength that I can come in and I can fix big problems. And therein might be an area that I need to work on and have been working on. I'm not going to do it all by myself. I think I did an awful lot more by myself 10 years ago than I do now with 10 years in the saddle. So an area of growth that I continue to work on is engaging all of the parties, including school committee, as we're working on complex issues, rather than just fixing it and reporting out.
Thank you. Communication is key, and it's very important in small communities as much as in large communities. The rumor mill works much faster than most electronic technology that we have today, and this district is no exception to that. Our board meets twice monthly. How will you keep the board abreast of what's going on so that we're not grabbed as you're walking out of church or out of a restaurant? Did you hear what happened at the school today? And we're caught blindsided. How would you keep the board informed with these issues?
Well, I have to ask the question whether everybody has an email account, because that's one of the mechanisms. And that's not always the case, because I currently have 22 school committee members, and some of them don't have a computer and don't want a computer. So I have to adapt to whatever the school committee's preferences are. But if there are issues happening that are ad hoc types of things that you just need to know about, odds are I would make a phone call to the chair and I'd follow up that phone call with an email to the committee. Now that can turn into a biweekly report that comes out to you. Certainly in the monthly report, the superintendent's report needs to cover everything that happened in the prior month.
Okay,
Yeah, and for the folks that don't use email, it would be a phone call.
all right, thank you. So why are you considering, at this point, leaving your current position?
I have a ton of love for my current district, and I hope it comes across, because I'm really so proud of what we've accomplished up there. And there's always more work to be done. But I went there to fix a huge problem. And the district has gone from being really in a state of chaos with just one disaster after another, to the point now where we've got level 1 schools and schools that are pushing level 1 and structures in place and educators really taking hold of the educational process. So it's a healthy district. And so I feel like I went there and I provided the value add that I wanted to bring. And now I'm looking for another mountain to climb.
Fair enough. If you're the successful candidate as the new superintendent for our district, would you consider relocating your family?
I'm going to be honest with you. My wife loves the house that we live in, and I report to her.
Good answer. It's
So
not a requirement, and I certainly don't want you to think it is. I just wanted to hear what you had to say about
That's a 45-minute commute. I've been used to commuting for an hour for a long time, so it's very manageable.
Okay. Given that there are a lot of different stakeholders, and there's been a few different questions that have evolved around this, I think part of the problem and part of the reason that we don't have as broad a base of support from the stakeholders, whether they be parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, selectmen in the various communities, all the stakeholders, is that because we don't report on a regular basis our success stories, our progress, and our setbacks, likewise. What vehicle do you use to, and I know you've touched on some of this, but to share that information with the general public
Right.
in a broader way? Because I think that information, if shared, would open people's eyes that we're not just sitting stagnant.
Right. So this really goes back to your earlier question. I did pretty much all of the marketing and communications for the district for several years, and I found that I just couldn't keep up with that. So what we've evolved to, I mean, if you were to go to our website, it's still a work in progress, but we needed to revamp the website because that is a critical way to communicate with the public. And on the website, what you'd find is at the district level and at each of the schools that the principals have a regular report that goes out to the public. So it goes in school committee packets and it's posted to the website so that everybody has access to that same information. And then we have vibrant schools. We have activities happening in the schools all the time, and those are other ways to communicate. So it's not just one thing. It's several. It's the website. It's newsletters that go in backpacks. It's having occasions to celebrate, and every school district does have something to celebrate. So, for example, something that I like to do in my school committee meetings is we have a section that is for the educators, and I like to bring students and teachers to school committee meetings to brag about something that they did that's really good. And I like to do that on a regular basis because it's a reminder of the importance of the work. Because working on a school committee, I don't know, a lot of school committees are disconnected from that piece, which is a shame because I think that's why you all got involved in it in the first place.
Is there anything in your personal or professional background that this board should know about prior to considering you for superintendency?
I worked as an intelligence officer for 15 years, so I can very confidently say to you, no.
Thank you. And I guess my final question, because most of my questions have been answered, and I thank you for that. Tell us and tell the audience and all the people that'll see this why you're the best person for our next superintendent's job.
And this will effectively be my closing statement. So I know that there's usually more than one way to solve a problem. I know that. And I know that there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done here. But I'm excited about this situation in particular because I see so many parallels from where I've spent the last decade. And I learned so much over those 10 years that I feel like I've got a ton of resources where I'll be able to process situations very quickly to help us get to where we need to be, rather than maybe struggle for a year or two on certain issues. So I just happen to think that the needs of this district are a very good match with my strengths. And I'm still a relatively young guy. I'm 48 years old. I've got to work a long time. My daughter is 12 years old, so 12 plus 6 plus college after that, right? I'm going to have to provide for a long time. I'm in this. And I have the endurance and the longevity, and I think this district needs somebody who's going to be here at least 5 years to really start to turn things around. And I'm prepared to make that sort of a commitment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vinny. Do any members have any follow-up questions that they'd like to ask? Mr. Nordquist?
If you get back to the email, I'm the only member on the board that doesn't have email, and I don't want it, so I would be expecting that phone call, but that's just my policy.
I'll make a note, Kurt.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any last-minute questions or follow-ups? Mike, are you satisfied with what you've told us? Is there anything that you'd like to...
Yeah, are there any questions out there? Please feel free.
Okay. Yes.
Mike, you've done a great job with the interview process, so kudos to you. Do you have any project management or Six Sigma lean training to use for process improvement and root cause analysis? Got an MBA, so did you do any of that type of training or ever have that opportunity in the military? You worked for Toyota secretly.
No, I didn't work for Toyota, and I've studied those processes, but it's all been textbook work. I haven't done anything in the real world to be able to, I mean, I understand what root cause is, and I understand problems and problem solving.
Do you think that at some point as you continue through the assessment process that you would consider resources that would focus on process improvement, a process improvement specialist?
Well, I think that's the reason why I think the work here is not a 3-year contract. It's a longer-term kind of an arrangement, because the only reason why I feel comfortable leaving where I am now is because I refer to them as systems, structures, continual improvement processes. It's not just having a dip, it's how you actually put that dip together, it's how you operate the district improvement plan. So there's underlying processes in all the work that we're doing. So, yes, I mean I think that's probably some of the hard work that needs to happen.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. All right, I think we're going to end it there, Mike. Thank you very much for coming here, and thank you for your interest in the district.
Yeah.
And we look forward to seeing you again.
Well, thanks an awful lot. I appreciate.
Had another question.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, last one. Go ahead.
Okay. Let me pick a good one then. How will you collect ideas and move empowerment to the front line of our education system?
That's what I think the beauty of professional learning communities is. I mean, that's very specifically intended to have everybody who participates in those communities, and it's not just at the teacher level, it's the paraprofessionals as well. They're part of the team also. Great ideas come from every corner.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for coming. This is the final interview for the two candidates that were selected for the Spencer East Brookfield Regional School District Superintendent's position. Tonight, we have the pleasure of having Dr. Nadine Tracy Crow with us, the Deputy Superintendent from the Pittsfield School System, another traveler from the West, as was the candidate that we had here last night. We're going to follow the similar format that we had last night. I'm going to give Dr. Crow an opportunity to take 2 or 3 minutes and give us an opening statement and share some of her background with us, and then I'll go to the committee members for questions. I'll filter in some questions that I've received from the public. Then we'll have a second shot for school committee members for follow-up questions, and then we'll give Dr. Crow an opportunity to give a closing statement. As I suggested last night, if any members have any follow-up questions that you'd like to ask after hearing an answer from questions from another member, please don't hesitate. Go forward and take the time to ask those questions and stuff. So let's move forward, and help me give a warm welcome to Dr. Crow.
Thank you so much. It is indeed my pleasure to be here tonight. As I pondered applying for this position, I have to tell you that I was somewhat exhilarated by the challenge. I will put it that way, that I have made a career out of going to districts that do have challenges that face them, because that is what excites me about working with students and staff. I am a consummate educator. I believe it's in my DNA. Have tried many times to branch off and do other things, and I find myself coming right back to it in some kind of training mode. When I graduated from Worcester State University, which at the time was Worcester State College, I had a triple major, so I could have gone a number of directions, but chose pretty quickly to go into a vocational technical school where I could see that the learning was applied. I was teaching mathematics at the time, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I was encouraged to pursue some advanced degrees while there, and they provided me the opportunity to not only get certified as a vocational technical instructor in mathematics, but also to complete degrees at Anna Maria College, my Master's of Arts, and also my Certificate of Advanced Graduate Study in Psychology. That brought me to apply for several grants, which I then worked with MIT, which again was a pivotal point in my career because it showed me the real value of the doing work that students do, as opposed to the just academic work. And that led me down many paths with many connections and working on some federal and state grants. Over the course of my career, I have been in every facet of education, from pre-K through graduate training. I have taught courses for Bay Path, for example, or Bridgewater State, Providence College, taught at MIT, still consult with them periodically. But the crux of my career has been focused on moving forward into the 21st century. And I believe that's what primarily brought me here. I see an opportunity to lead a district. I feel I'm fully prepared for that. I think everything I've done up to this point has led me to this juncture. I think that Spencer East Brookfield is poised for greatness. I know that they're working hard on getting there, and I believe I can be part of that process. Many of the things that I've had an opportunity in my career to do, I think have all led me here, whether it be my work at Mass Hospital School in special ed, my work at the Department of Education as a program coordinator. All of those experiences have led me here, including the one that I'm in right now in Pittsfield. Pittsfield, likewise, had many, many challenges when I went there. Greenfield also had many challenges when I went there. Those are the things that excite me. It excites me to know that I can be part of a change process. I see myself as a change agent, and I see Spencer East Brookfield as a system that's ready for some changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. For members, in talking with Tracy, she shared with me her mom would prefer a Nadine. She would prefer a Tracy, so address her accordingly.
I'd be very happy to see this, though, I have to tell you.
We'll start our question tonight with Mr. Kurt Nordquist, the senior member of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. your first question, why our district? What about our district interest that you would make you want to come here? Why Spencer?
Spencer East Brookfield, I think, is facing some obstacles right now. I think that everybody's well aware of that. I've read the state report. I've done my research and looked at the scores. I've looked at the professional development. I've looked at all of the things these are all things that I've done before, and these are things that excite me to work on again. But I do believe that Spencer East Brookfield can be poised for greatness. I've seen this happen in other parts of the state where I've worked, and I like to be part of that change.
Thank you. My next question is, how would you describe the financial condition of this district, and what would be your ideas to move it forward, beside an override?
Aside from an override.
Aside from an override.
Okay. Well, again, having been in specifically Greenfield and Pittsfield, similar situations, set funds, a situation that, particularly in Greenfield, they lost 70 teachers in 1 year. Every administrator resigned, and they were left with a budget that was almost inoperable in many ways. And the way that you do it is you dig down and you get people to work together, and you find strategies that are both creative but also innovative, but sometimes scary, because you do have to take some chances. You have to take some calculated guesses as how to move the district forward. You tighten your belt, you roll up your sleeves, and you start working together. But I think that one of the things that has to happen first is some relationship building and some trust building in order to make that happen. That certainly happened in Pittsfield. That certainly was the way that we did it in Pittsfield.
Thank you. My next question is, what innovative ideas would you use to address the budget problem while keeping an excellent program going? It kind of follows on the second question.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the first part of that question?
What innovative ideas would you use to address the budget problem while keeping an excellent program going?
Well, for example, with professional development, one of the ways that we've done that in Pittsfield is to have teacher-driven professional development, where teachers are teaching colleagues best practices. We've launched that because we do have PD money, but we have a limited amount. And it doesn't, with over 600 teachers, it doesn't go very far when you have this budget, but 600 people want parts of it. So we've done teacher-driven PD. Again, very innovative. We vetted those proposals, and those are now launched, and they're educating our teachers, and we're finding that we're getting a lot of mileage out of that. That's just one idea. But that was an idea that came with working with our union to make that happen. Another idea is that when we have budget money, then clearly you must prioritize. You must look at the funds that you have, and you must say, what do we need to do first? Because the first thing is what takes priority, and we work down from there. It's a reprioritization of what your needs are.
My last question is what experience do you have in developing programs designed to bring students back into the district?
We have a number of programs in Pittsfield. We did the same types of programs in Greenfield, namely that, first of all, making students want to stay to start with, to retain. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we have several what I consider innovations. One of them is called POPs, which is Positive Options, where some students actually attend classes at BCC, Berkshire Community College, and that is their school, that is their classroom. They actually take courses there, and they can actually start to earn some college credits. That's a program that serves a number of students. We have also, we had Plato Learning. We now have Compass. We've done some online learning. We have a student resource center where we have a number of students who have challenges for being in school, and so they take their classes there, and they're supervised by teachers, but they have tutors that are working with them on a regular basis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Kurt. Our next questions will come from committee member Angela Napton.
Thank you. Sorry. My first question is, what do you think your priority should be for the first 60 days after you become superintendent?
My first priorities are developing some relationships in the community, both internally and externally. So in the school community, clearly, I've met some wonderful people tonight, and I hope to meet more. Meeting parents, attending school council sessions, making sure that I'm visible in the community so people get to know me. I think that one of the things that we've learned in Pittsfield is transparency is critical to everything that we do, everything. When you're going into a system that has some needs, such as Pittsfield did or such as Spencer East Brookfield has, it's imperative that relationships be developed, some trusts be developed, so that as you're moving forward, you have people that are willing to work with you and trust that you're going to do the right thing for the community. So I would be holding meetings, both in groups as well as individually, and I would pretty much keep an open door in terms of people that would like to come and speak to me to give me their perspectives on what needs to happen moving forward.
Thank you. My next question, have you worked to develop school committee goals and district goals, and how would you go about doing that here?
We've certainly worked on district goals. Beyond the district improvement plan, and I supervise all the principals in Pittsfield directly. So I have 12 to 14 people if you count the alternative programs and the adult ed. And each one of those is charged with developing their school improvement plan that's in line with the district improvement plan. I work specifically with the superintendent and the cabinet and the executive team on that plan. Those plans are developed around data. It's all data-driven, and it's built around what the needs for the students are specifically. In turn, each school then looks at their own data and develops their plans, but I work with both of those.
Thanks.
Did that adequately
Yeah,
address
that's
your question? Okay.
My final question is, what have you learned from each step in your career path that you think has helped you to become the type of superintendent our district should choose?
Well, as I said before, I think everything that I've done, I've been incredibly fortunate in my lifetime to have wonderful opportunities to work in a variety of venues. The vocational technical school certainly opened my eyes to an entire world of career pathways for students. Besides that, it also opened my eyes because of the work with MIT to systems thinking. And really having an analytical view of how all the systems not just work independently, but more importantly, how they work together, what the synergy is. I think that those two things were pivotal for me early on. I think in addition to that, because I have experience with the Department of Ed, because I have experience working in several systems that had high needs and turning them around, it's provided me some experiences to develop the skills that are necessary to move a district forward.
Thanks.
Thank you, Angela. Our next questions will come from committee member Michael Ethia.
Welcome.
Thank you.
My first question is, how would you deal with a problem in which opinions were polarized, and what would you do, how would you plan, and what did you learn from it?
So an experience I've had where the opinions were polarized?
Yes.
I've had lots of those, Michael. Thank you for asking. A lot of times it's listening very carefully. I think that sometimes we think that opinions are polarized when in fact people underneath some of the rhetoric have the same goals in mind. I can give you an example that I frequently will intervene. The deputy's office, I know you don't have a deputy in this district, but the deputy's office is really the complaint department in many ways, because if they don't get the answer they want at a school, my office is next. So I'm frequently mediating between schools, concerns from parents, could be a concern from a teacher to the principal, could be a concern between a teacher and a parent, it could be a lot of things. I'm also the civil rights officer, so those things could come to me, and those tend to be very polarized opinions when those complaints come in. How discipline was, handed out. So a lot of times it's really listening carefully, because there can be miscommunications, there can be misunderstandings. That's the first thing I listen for, is to make sure I understand both points of view. when I have to weigh those 2 points of view, sometimes it comes down to policy, and sometimes it comes down to what's the best answer. But my vote is always what's the best answer for the student. It's always about what does the student need, what's in the best interest of the student. So I don't know if that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good, thank you. What criteria would you use in selecting the members of your administration team, and what are the key elements of character you would look for in those members?
Great question. As the hiring manager for many positions in Pittsfield, one of the things that I've tried to instill in the principals when they do their hiring is the fact that when you interview people, interview for core values as opposed to skill sets, because sometimes skill sets can be taught pretty quickly. But if the core values are not there about valuing student input, being firm on being part of a team, being a collaborator, being somebody who cares about the bigger picture as well as the smaller picture, willing to work together as a team unit, a lot of those things, the things I try to instill in them to look for. Someone who doesn't know how to read data, for example, I'll teach them how to read data. But if they don't care about children, and they don't care to listen to parents, and they don't care about being part of a community, it's going to be really hard for me to teach them those core values. If they have those core values, I'll teach them the other nitty-gritty part that I have to teach them. But I care first and foremost about them caring about students and having a vision for the future for those students and believing that every student can and will learn if they're supported the right way. So that's the first part, and my administrators have to be able to do the same thing.
Good. Thank you. Give us an example of a time you made a proposal that was strongly opposed in a public forum, and how did you deal with it at the forum and then afterwards?
Okay. Another bad one. My first year in Pittsfield, we had an opportunity to do a race to the top, the Race to the Top D grants. So we had an opportunity to go after $22 million. We could have been part of that. And there was a lot of resistance because there was a fear that if we were going to expect personalized learning for every student, this would impact teachers too much. And there was a very vocal response about it. It was in the newspaper, it was in editorials, and we did not, as a result, go forward with it. I learned a really important lesson from that experience. Don't rush. Take your time and make sure you have buy-in for your proposals. Make sure that you have buy-in from a variety of people as opposed to just the people that wanted to implement. It was really important that we got some parent buy-in on that, and we did not do that because we were under a time constraint, which you frequently are with grants, as you probably know. But I learned an important lesson that all the work that we did for that grant, all the research that we did, all the writing that we did, all the data collection that we did, my staff was very, very disappointed we did not move forward with that grant and did not get it because it would have made a huge difference for our district. However, the positive side, and I've told them this, and I tell them this on a regular basis, it's just come up again this year with another grant, we have the legwork done now that's poised, ready to roll when we get another opportunity. And what we need to do is we need to go out and we need to vet this with various factions of people so that we're ready to launch as soon as we get that word that the grant was just, the RFP is up. But I did learn an important lesson from that. Very important lesson. It was a costly lesson, but it was very important.
Okay. And one last one from me. What steps would you take to stop the rising school choice out of the district, and how would you plan to bring students back to our district and make our district attractive to students and parents to actually choice in?
I'm doing that right now. Another good question. We have a huge choice out issue, as you know, large cities typically do. Parents walk, they vote with their feet. They go to another district, and with them goes that foundation money. So we've made a concerted effort since I've been in the district with the first superintendent for whom I worked. We made an effort to do a lot of PR around the benefits of a Pittsfield education. There are pockets of excellence. I will guarantee you there are pockets of excellence here. I'm sure that some of you sitting in the audience know what those are. It's to find those pockets of excellence and make sure that people know about those pockets of excellence, because they only know what they're reading or they're hearing. It's important to show visibly via the website, via cable. We've done cable spots so that we present. We have a new kindergarten age requirement. We've been presenting that, but also showing simultaneously the wonderful things that the kindergarten teachers are doing with the kindergarten students and how they're prepared for first grade now, very differently than they were probably 10 years ago when their parents went to kindergarten. Those are some of our PR efforts. We've done a lot of work with not just showing the athletic events, but showing the academic events, talking about, the quiz group and talking about what students are doing and the community service that they're working on, and highlighting some of the vocational programs and some of the teachers doing their things in their classroom. Because I think that generally people who don't have students in school yet would not know that. But if they can see actual examples of people teaching and how wonderful it can be, then they will come. They will not start to think about going to a different district. We also, this was sort of my brainchild last year, we had some race to the top money that we had earmarked for technology specifically, but I felt a strong need to launch something in the elementary schools. So I started what was called the Innovation Project, and we vetted it with the principals and the teaching staff in each building, and we selected one teacher who would get a state-of-the-art classroom with that equipment. That teacher would also get training with the idea that that person would become the ambassador for good practice in a state-of-the-art classroom for others. And we have now presented that to both school committee. We've also presented that at Tech Forum, and we're going to be shooting segments for the cable TV station so that people can actually have an eye into those classrooms where the kids are working 21st century right now.
Very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mike. Our next questions will come from committee member Mrs. Heather Messier.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Across the different levels of the district, describe how you will know whether professional development programs and initiatives have affected the knowledge, skills, and practices of educators in the district, and how would you hold educators at all levels, pre-K to 12, accountable to delivering effective instruction?
Ooh. Good one. Another good one. I like the questions. PD, really important, critical. Going as far back as Keefe Tech. I was the PD coordinator, and I was doing PD for both. I was arranging it. I wasn't actually offering it, but I was arranging it for both vocational as well as academic instructors. And then it had to be measurable. What's the difference now? We do a survey each year. I think it's important to survey teachers and say, what training do you feel you need? Because they know, based on the scores that you see, what do we need? So I inform that process. Principals inform that process. Parents inform that process. But the teacher himself or herself informs that process too. It happens when they develop goals with their principal, but more importantly, on a regular basis, they know what they need. They see what's coming down the road for enrollment projections and say, boy, next year I'm going to need a lot more RTI training, or I'm going to need a lot more math development skills. I need this for next year. Or I need to figure out how to do more effective questioning. We've just launched a big program this year about questioning techniques because we think it gets to the core of how to bring kids to a higher order thinking level is with the question itself. Teachers told us that. They said, I think I need to ask better questions because my questions don't look like MCAS questions that I ask on tests. So we got there through that survey. And again, through the teacher-driven PD, teachers offer what they know their colleagues want and need from them. and they become the expert in some ways to offer that training. But then we do a survey at the end, and we evaluate, and our teachers evaluate each other that have provided that training. We also evaluate every offering that we do outside the system. So if we send people to Keys to Literacy training, for example, when they come back, we ask them, was that valuable, was that not valuable, and we actually look at it, and then we measure what goes on in their classroom following that PD. PD is expensive, so if we're going to do it, we want to make sure that we're getting the bang for our buck.
Thank you.
Did that adequately address what you were really going for?
Yes.
Okay.
We currently have 3 schools in a level 3 status based on MCAS scores. How would you develop district-wide capacity to assess, analyze, and monitor student performance?
Data teams. We're very, very strong in that. Every school, every August, as soon as the data is released, we have data team meetings for 3 days. We have the teachers come, we have them look at the data with the principal. It's a team from the school. We change up those teams every year so that we're training more and more people how to read the data and how to interpret it, and how to implement changes that will be effective in addressing the needs from the data. So it's not just being able to print out the sheet and saying, yep, there were the scores, didn't do well again. It's about, what do we need to do next? Where are our biggest deficits? On the math MCAS, is it in geometry? Why did we fall flat on geometry? We need to do more in geometry then. Maybe that's going to inform our PD. But putting data teams together for every building, I'm a strong believer. This is from my time in Greenfield when we had expanded learning time, worked with a great organization, focused on results, that we had data posted everywhere in the building. Attendance, they can't learn if they don't come. Let's put the attendance up. Let's be honest about it. They're not in the seat. We can't deliver instruction. How are they doing? Let's get a baseline. How are they doing right at the beginning? Because we should have a value added by December. We should be able to say, look, how much progress they've made. So constant measurement, benchmarking throughout the year, and looking at that data to then move forward to the next stage. We do that on a regular basis. I insist that the principals do that. I expect teachers to have objectives posted in the rooms. Kids need to know, this is what we're supposed to be doing today, and here's the takeaway from today's lesson. This is what I should take away. We post it. Those should be up. People should know what they are. The other way that I did it is I changed the field trip forms. This probably seems like a silly thing, but field trip forms said, yes, we want to go to the apple orchard, and we'd like to pick apples, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to take 40 students, and we're going to have 5 chaperones. And I'd say, what standard are we addressing? We have so little instructional time. I want to make sure that if we're not getting instruction in a room, we're getting instruction by learning something and addressing a standard to practice it then when we leave that building. So that's changed people because it's forcing them to rethink those standards on a daily basis when they take a field trip, or even if they want to do something different in their classroom. Nobody gets new textbooks without telling me, here's why we need them. Because we didn't have a lot of money for textbooks. So making sure. The other thing that was important in Pittsfield is to get some uniformity and consistency across the district, because it's not right that a student who's in 2nd grade at this school, his parents can say, and this is dressed as some of the choice, we have out-of-district transfer within the district, so parents are allowed to say, well, I'd like to be at that school instead. I think it's a better school. That was a problem for us. I should never have a parent say that's a better school than that school that has the same grade. I should have the same curriculum, number one. I should have the same high-quality instruction, and I should definitely have the same textbooks and materials and resources available to those students. So nobody should ever be able to say that part. They might say it's a longer commute, but not that it's better. And I think that all of those things converge. I think that that data-driven piece, the PD piece, and also the fact that there's a constant recognition of what the standards are and how to move the students forward and list the objectives and make sure everybody knows what they are is important. But it's going back to the PD. If we see a problem, then what are we going to do about it? Don't wait till the end of the year when that big high-stakes test happens. It's too late.
Okay, thank you. What is your experience with special education? What programs or interventions have you established that have helped the special education department in your district run more efficiently to deliver the best possible services?
A lot of my experience was at Mass Hospital School with IEPs. That was primarily special ed, so that was big. Those are highly involved IEPs. But in a regular public school setting, a lot of my experience revolves around looking carefully at interventions before we do the referral for special ed. It's sort of a front investment, so to speak. Special education can be very, very expensive. I want to be sure that the student really does need those heavy-duty interventions, because I think too often we're too quick to judge that the first time we see a behavior problem, the next thing we're doing is referring. So I've spent a lot of time in the districts that I've been in talking about least restrictive environment. You know, how can we be sure, how can we assess, how can we get somebody to look at the data on behavior or look at the data on academic achievement and decide what interventions need to happen that we should try first. That's good practice for every student. I think that's first and foremost. That's one way. I think that the next thing is to make sure that you have the right highly qualified people instructing in special education, and that they're very, very in tune to the regular education content. The last thing that we want to do, and it's something we struggle with in Pittsfield right now, is to have them believe that that student is not part of a class, but the special ed teacher's charge. Because our charge is to educate every student to their fullest potential. And the more they get pulled out and taken away from that regular ed environment where the academics are being taught, the further and further behind they might get. So it's important to get those two people working in concert together in the classroom. So I believe in push-in, a lot of push-in services.
Okay. In what ways have you looked at ways to contain costs while balancing the needs of students? In terms of special education, I'm sorry.
That's one of them.
Okay.
That's a big one. We've also looked at class size. We do a constant battle with balancing class sizes that we don't like to see class sizes get to 30, 33 in a freshman class at high school. It's a pivotal year. If there's 33 in a class of AP students, we don't usually see that happen because they self-select out. So we look at class size and we try to keep them very, very balanced, which is a struggle with the schedule sometimes based on, electives that they'd like to take, like band, for example. That might dictate when we can put them in. But class size is one way, trying to keep it balanced. Those classes of 3 to 5 are a killer financially. When a teacher has 35 students all day, someone else has a caseload of 150 to 180. That's a problem. That's one thing. The other cost-saving ways are efficiencies in terms of paperwork. We find that there's sometimes a lot of inefficiency with paperwork. We've chosen to use technology to solve that problem. Secretarial staff, for example, we seem to be making lots of copies of lots of things, lots of times. We've decided to use technology to not only go green, to be more responsible stewards of the earth, but also to save money. It ultimately saves us money. We've instituted 3 programs since I've been there. ASOP, you're probably familiar with these. ASOP is one. School Spring is another. We were not using School Spring when I arrived because it saves paper, tons of paper. And Teach Point for the Ed-Eval. So we've instituted those 3, and we know those have saved us huge amounts of money. There's a front payout that we have to do for the software, but the savings in return is great.
Our district has 5 schools in 5 different locations. How would you make yourself readily available to all of our schools on a consistent basis? How would you organize your time to be sure each school receives equal attention?
You plan it. It's with 14 facilities. it takes time to get to all of them, but I try to plan it out so that it's part of my regular schedule. It's right on my Google Calendar. It's planned right in. I'm making a visit to Allendale School, or I'm making a visit to the Pittsfield High School, or whatever it is, and each principal knows when I'm coming. Sometimes I drop in just because I'm driving by, because I've had an emergency somewhere in one of the schools, and I'm driving by and I just drop in. But by and large, I plan it. I also have regular meetings with staff that they come to me. In turn, the principals come to me. It gets them out of their building and gets them solid time that we just focus on PD for the principals, because principals need PD too. And we talk about what they need at those monthly meetings. I work with coordinators. I have a coordinator staff as well, and again, they converse with the principals to make sure that they're aligning programs and there's a coordination of effort. So it's planned. I guess it's the easiest way to put it. It has to be planned because things happen. So you have to put it in the calendar to make sure.
Okay. And then finally, what is your stance and your district's stance on the park assessment?
Oh, wonderful park. Well, I don't care, there's some concern. We have some parents that are concerned about Common Core, whether that's a good idea or not. We've been aligning our curriculum. I don't care what we call it. I don't care what test we go to. I really care about opening doors for students. The analogy I always use is, some people just want to open windows and let students see what might happen in their future, but I want to keep the doors open so that they have every possibility to walk through any door that they can. I don't want to limit what they can do. So I don't care if we call it PARC, MCAS. I don't really care what the test is. I want to prepare students for the future. I know what 21st century skills are that they need. I know what needs to be done. I hold principals accountable to make sure that that's happening in classrooms. In turn, they hold the teachers accountable for making sure that it happens. I think every teacher, every parent wants the same thing for that student. They want to see them as a successful citizen in the future. And we have to make sure that we do that in a number of ways, but we've got to work together to do it. So I would say that PARC, MCAT, it doesn't really matter what the test is. We benchmark all the time. I believe in assessment. I think the PARC questions, if you've looked at them, much higher order thinking than some of the MCAS questions of the past. And I think our students can do it. But we need to prepare them. And that's why we're doing the questioning techniques this year, because we know that we have to get to more deeply rooted consideration when someone asks a question. We have to get to that higher order piece, because that's what they're going to be expected to do in the jobs of the future. They're going to be expected to problem solve.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Heather. Following up on Heather's question, Tracy, what are some of the things that concern you about Common Core? And if you do favor that, is it because you truly believe that it's better for the kids, or does it have anything to do with being tied to funding from state and federal agencies?
Well, if I could just digress for one moment to tell you a little story. I was chosen as one of the U.S. delegates, one of 6 delegates, to visit China for a month during the summer. And one of the reasons that we were going was to both compare and contrast the two systems. So China, as you probably know, is one state. They have one set of standards. They have one set of rules. They have one set of tests. They have one set of books. They have one set of everything. I would never want to get to that point where we're just so absolutely exactly the same, because I don't think it's healthy. I think it does not make us competitive globally. I see the advantages of doing that, certainly, but I don't see us ever doing that completely as a country. I think the Common Core is the basic minimum of the standards that are set nationally that we should all be adhering to. I don't necessarily have an issue with that part. What I have an issue with is everybody thinking that every student everywhere is the same. So I've said to my teachers, there are basics that are musts, just like we say to the students in elementary, if there are any elementary people here, the must-dos, and then we have the want-to-dos. And every teacher I know brings to the table the ability to have these really great skill sets about teaching certain things. I would never want to lose that just because we must do all of these things that they say we must do, but it's not that prescribed, in my opinion. There are basics that must be done, and you can always add to that. But the must-dos have to be in place, because these are the absolute skills that they must have in order to be productive in their future careers. So I'm not sure
That's right, yeah. If you found after some time that you didn't think that the standards of Common Core were working for the district, what steps would you take?
Again, it would be data-driven. If we believe that we've aligned and we're moving in that direction and we're seeing students not do as well as we had expected them to do, firm believer in that cycle of continual improvement. We're going to give it as much time as we feel we need to educationally. We're going to vet that with a variety of groups and say, do we need to give it more time, or are we done? And if we're done, we're going to a new plan.
When Common Core implementation was started in your district, how was it rolled out? Was there PD training for teachers? Were there programs that went home to parents? How was the whole process handled?
It was rolled out as soon as I arrived. They had worked on some curriculum guides that were for the teachers, and what we did is we did a half day of professional development for the teachers to look at those guides. Teachers participated in developing those guides, by the way, but not every teacher had seen them yet, and they were online. So we were rolling those out so that people would see those. We did that on Convocation Day. So half the day was done with speeches, and the other half was done right at the very first day of school when teachers returned. And then we let them digest them. But we talked about what are the pitfalls, what do you think we're going to have for problems? And they were very, very vocal about what they thought the problems were going to be. The coordinators then worked with them to resolve some of those concerns and beef up the guides. And those guides, we believe, are living documents. We don't believe those are done. We don't believe they're ever done. I don't believe that curriculum is ever completed. It's never a final product that gets bound into a nice, neat notebook and put on the shelf, because it's constantly changing. Our technology is changing everything we do so fast that we can't think of it in any other way other than being live.
Okay, thank you. Does the demographics of coming from an urban school district with some 6,000 students to a suburban school system here with around 1,800 students, does that change your educational priorities or philosophy or how you would perform your duties?
No, not really. I went to a regional high school. I grew up in a very small town, Northborough, in case anybody was interested in knowing. Went to Algonquin Regional District. I worked in a regional district at the Voc School, about 1,000 students. So no, it doesn't change my basic philosophy of anything. I believe that all students can and will learn if they're supported correctly.
In the literature that you've given us, you've created models for learning and teaching. Can you give us an example of two of models that you've created that resulted in educational improvements?
I'll give you one that was early on, and then I'll give you one that was very recent, I guess. You can figure out the middle part. The early on was at the vocational school, and it was a model to get academic teachers to understand the trades, and the trades people, so to speak, to understand the academics, the pressures of the academics. It was a huge model at the time, because it had not really been done. They never did PD together. They never interacted other than to know that they were in the teachers' lounge sometimes at the same time. And it was pretty enlightening to see women in high heels going into the carpentry shop, and it was pretty interesting. But I think it was illuminating for the staff, because they started to understand how they could make learning come alive for students who were maybe not the kids that really loved academics. They could see how they could make it come alive. And again, that was a pivotal point for me when we were able to do that, because I think it really got me excited about being able to reach all students instead of just some students that loved math, for example. I had a lot of students that didn't like math, I'm sorry to tell you, but I tried to make sure that by the time they left as a senior, they were at least feeling confident about going out into the world. A recent one would be the innovation classrooms. That has really dramatically changed each of the elementary schools, because those are now models within the building, and those are also rooms where any teacher in the building can come and utilize that classroom or the equipment on a loan basis, and we're starting to see more and more and more of that, and we're starting the second round of training for those teachers to get them more extended training. So they're going to the MassQ conference, for example, and they'll come back and then they'll share that in the teacher-driven professional development.
Thank you. You've held faculty positions at various colleges in special education. Would you share our philosophy with you on the delivery of services of special ed, and would you support providing programs in this district that would allow us to keep as many special ed students in-house?
I would. I would definitely encourage us to keep as many students. I believe that we have an obligation to our own students, and we should develop the programs that are necessary to allow those students to get to their fullest potential. I do know that sometimes students, because I worked at Mass Hospital School and that's who those students were, they needed very, very specialized, either medical or very, very specialized kinds of training. These are the students that cannot access the regular curriculum in a meaningful way and need additional attention. So for those students, I can see how the placement needs to be external, because we would not have the funds to provide those expensive training facilities. But to the fullest extent possible, I would want to keep our own students, because I think we have an obligation to them.
Thank you. You've indicated an interest in community team building. Can you give us an example of what you've done in that area and how that concept worked?
When I started in well, I'm going back to my start in Pittsfield. My first week on the job was about Team Pittsfield. We had T-shirts printed because I wanted to make the point that it wasn't just about the school system. It was about every facet of the community. So we had the police there, we had the mayor's office, we had the business community. We developed business partners. If we didn't have them already in a school, we developed business partners to support the students. We had the school nurses, we had the custodians, we had the food service workers, we had, you get the idea, I won't go through the whole list, but we had every person who, bus drivers, anyone who touched a student's life in some way, we had as Team Pittsfield, because I felt so strongly that a bus driver starts the day with a student. They sometimes realize if something's wrong before the child even gets to school. They're pretty important in the process. The mayor's office, done a number of segments with him on cable, because we've had some incidents in Pittsfield that have needed to be talked about with not just the school system, but with the city and how the city was going to support our efforts to turn it around. I just feel like that team is bigger than just the educational professionals. I put a lot of emphasis on what the educational professionals do, but I do believe, somebody said to me tonight, one of the parents made a great statement, said it does take a village. I said, it absolutely does take a village, and sometimes it takes a region. It's not just the village. It can be beyond the actual town. The colleges, the universities, whatever.
Would you share with us your financial and budgetary experience?
I actually, I know that the budget book, yes. I've worked on budget pretty much anywhere I've been, from a variety of angles, whether it be a classroom teacher asking for things and begging for things, which in many cases I did, or when in the deputy's position, in my most recent position, having to help put a budget together for, over $50 million, but work on a team. Again, it's a team. It's a team effort. So I don't want anyone to think that, could you just hold that up so people don't, no, the budget thing that's inside? Right, yeah. So we decided this year, the business manager decided that we wanted to be incredibly transparent we knew we were doing some asks, and we wanted to be incredibly transparent. We felt we'd been transparent before, but the budget book that we put together before was one of these 4-inch loose-leaf notebooks, which nobody would actually read, we knew, which maybe that was why they did the big notebook. I'm not sure. Could be. I'm not sure, but it was fairly large, and nobody actually, nobody was going to carry those around and actually look at them or fan through them. So we did this with pictures of students to show them, pictures of the buildings, because our buildings are deteriorating, so we wanted the public to know, here's the school. You may not have been in the school for a while, but here it is. And then we laid out everything we were doing asks for. So when I met with the principals and said, I want an A list, a B list, and a C list. A list is what you absolutely cannot run your building unless here's the list. What do you need? How many instructors, how many students, how many sections of kids, what do we need? Then your B list is, if for some reason you could get really what you want, what's the want list? That's different than the A list, and you'd have to keep talking about what's the A list really mean, because you had to keep pulling them back. And the C list is, if we got this huge, we win the lottery, somebody has a ticket and donates it to the system, what do you want? What would you do if you really had no limits? That brought up some really interesting things, because those are now on a wish list that is sitting there waiting for grants, ready to roll. So they've done a lot of legwork on that C list, actually. But it was hard getting them back to A list, but once we did, then we said, so we start here, but what do we really need if we're going to move the district forward, now that we're starting to get into some of the B list? But we have to prioritize. Not everybody can get everything they want. And as we made attempts to do that, we got more and more transparent, and then that's what you see in the book. It's sort of here's where we are, here's the buildings, here's custodial services, here are the buses, here, here's the food service piece, here's this, here's this, here's this, here's this. This is what we need. What would you like us to cut back? And we ended up we actually added staff this year, which we weren't sure we were going to be able to do, but we only added 2. Which for a district that size is, pretty small. But they were pretty important positions, because they were what are called educational team liaisons for special ed, and we really needed those because we did not have people doing IEPs, and we wanted to be sure we were compliant on the IEPs. So that has helped us a lot this year. But we were transparent. Everything was about transparency. Everything was about sort of gaining back the trust of people, that it wasn't just magic, this number that ended up on the bottom line for total, that there was a logic to it, and we had walked it through.
In the area of grants, what has your experience been as far as how those are handled? Are they approved or brought before the school council or school committee before they're applied for? And when they're put into the budget and received, are they segregated out from the overall budget? And how do you identify all the administrative costs, and those part of the general budget as well?
It's a really good point, the last part of your sentence, because there are many grants, but administratively, sometimes they cost more to run than what you actually get, and the reporting out and the time consumption for personnel is huge. So we weigh those very carefully. We actually have a grants meeting once a month where people bring to the table grants they might be looking at or thinking about. We also talk about where we are in the grants we currently hold, because we do have, as you can see in the budget book, considerable number of grants. Most city systems do. They can't survive without grants. But we report out on what we're actually already doing, then we report out on who has an idea for a new one, and are we ready to roll on that? If we are, to answer your question, yes, everything does go before the committee, because we have subcommittees of the school committee that hear any curriculum pieces or policy pieces, and then we always bring the grants to the general committee. School committee must sign off anyway, so they do know.
All right, thank you. I think we all would agree that there's no substitute for effective leadership, and your background certainly exhibits successful leadership in many areas. And one that I'd like to focus on, because it's been experienced to some degree here in this district, one of the people that sent a recommendation on your behalf, the intern superintendent of Pittsfield School District, and I'll quote him, states, Dr. Crow inherited a rather random system of determining professional development. Furthermore, the union held considerable control over the membership of the Professional Development Committee. Hence, there existed a two-pronged challenge: align professional development offerings with the data-driven areas of weakness and focus a misled union leadership that resisted change in the name of too much work for the teachers. The question is, how did you do it?
Okay. How much time do you have?
We just died.
It's a rather long answer for this one. There was a deliberate effort. I so firmly believe in professional development. I mean, it's, again, part of my DNA that I believe. I'm first and foremost a learner, and I'm an educator as well. But even in administration, you're still an educator of adults, and you can't forget that part. So part of my job, as I saw it with Dr. Noseworthy, was convincing some of the factions that this was not just in the best interest of students, but in their best interest as well. That what we were going to be doing was to lead a charge to have more respect, to have more confidence, to be able to negotiate a new contract with the confidence to say, we are highly skilled professionals. We had those conversations. We also instituted the JLMC, the Joint Labor Management Committee, so that we didn't have to go all the way into negotiations in order to have a conversation about what we were trying to do. We could have a collegial dialogue. That has helped immensely. But it was building trust. It was first developing relationships and developing strong relationships. And that didn't mean we had to agree. That just meant we had to understand each other and where we were coming from and respect for each other's work. That was first. The second thing was developing trust and confidence in each other, that we were both looking for the same result somehow. And that's how we've done some of that teacher-driven PD, is that we've developed this cadre of professionals in the teaching ranks over the course of 2 years that now, I believe, trust the process, believe that they're going to be respected for that process, and are willing to invest time to get it done and to share with their colleagues. So I'm not sure if I...
Yes, yep, that's very good.
But he and I worked on that feverishly at the beginning. It was, again, I love challenges, so it was something that I enjoyed actually coming out and seeing the light on the other side, because we're starting to see a lot of light right now. We're very, very excited about the offerings for this year.
How would you convince all the stakeholders, administrators, teachers, parents, students, municipal leaders, that in order to bring this district to the level of performance that we all want to see, that it requires change? And how will you work with people to get them to accept that?
Education, education, education. Change is hard.
Yeah.
You know, inertia is a terrible thing. And I understand that, but I'm a change agent. I mean, that's what I do. That is what I do. I've built a career around change. That is sort of my middle name. When I see a problem, I like to figure out if I can solve it. I think teachers like to do that too. I think teachers didn't go into the teaching profession, contrary to sometimes people saying, well, they love those summers off. I don't know 5 teachers that take summers off. I mean, everybody works a second job or tutors students or rests and relax for 2 weeks and then does something for PD, or they take a course. So I think that I don't know a teacher that truly doesn't want to do the best thing for students. They didn't go into this for any other reason except students. I don't know an administrator that doesn't want the same thing. What's hard is understanding how can it get done.
Right.
So the big thing is educating and making sure that they trust and they have confidence in their leadership to get it done. So it's not just about in the leadership who's the figurehead, but in the leadership in general, the school committee, the superintendent, the principals, the school councils. believing that they're all on board for the same purpose and the same reason, which is to move students forward so they can be successful in the future.
And that will lead me to my last question. What role would you see the school committee play in your superintendency?
Critical role. I see the superintendent as simply an agent for the committee, a representative of the committee in all facets of their work. They're a governance organization. Their major role is to hire the superintendent, evaluate the superintendent, retain the superintendent or fire the superintendent, and then set policy and scrutinize the budget and make sure that the best is being done for the students of the district. So I see it as pivotal. There has to be a really good relationship. There has to be a very strong connection. There has to be, again, an openness and an honesty to get the work done, because there's a lot of work ahead.
Okay, thank you. That ends my questions. I have received some questions from the community. Most of them have been answered by committee members in their questions already. Have a couple that still haven't. I'll ask them, and then we'll conclude with Mr. Cloutier with his final question. So
Okay.
These are some questions that have come from the community. Please identify and give an example of an issue that you have had where you had to take corrective action. What was the plan? How was the success or failure of it measured?
All right, so the one that comes to mind is, principal is no longer with us, left the district. Principal who, on MCAS testing, had all kinds of discrepancies. We had him trying to, sort of pad the deal of the testing environment. We had him call students back and say, oh, come on, just work on these few questions. I mean, they were egregious. Corrective action was taken in a variety of ways, both internally as well as by the department, of course. The department part was easy. The internal part was more difficult because he was somewhat beloved by parents. But we were not going to disclose all the errors, but there were numbers of errors with the MCAS security. There were numbers of problems with the MCAS administration, and we took that very seriously, so we took action that went into his file.
Another question from a citizen is, how will you collect ideas and move empowerment to the front line of our educational system?
Can you repeat that whole question again? I heard the empowerment part. I got the, got the empowerment part. But
How will you collect ideas and move empowerment to the front line of our educational system?
well, again, as the question was asked about the first 60 days, those are pretty important days because it sets the tone for everything else. And I would want to collect ideas from those people, those stakeholders. And it's beyond just internal. As I said, it would be the external stakeholders as well. I would want to be meeting with those people and understanding all their perspectives, and then I would assimilate those perspectives, knowing, what perspectives they come from. What things do I need to worry about immediately, and what things can I put on the table to take care of later. But the empowerment piece, I would want to get people to invest. And I said this to a number of parents tonight, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself based on the meet and greet, but the success of a district is reliant on a number of factors. It's certainly leadership from the school committee and the superintendent and the principals. It's also leadership in the classroom. It's also leadership in the student ranks. It's leadership on a variety of fronts. But it's also making sure that everybody feels they have a voice, because everybody in the community should care what this community does. Everybody, whether they have a student in school. I frequently hear, oh, well, my kids are all grown and they're not in school anymore, and my grandchildren live in California, and so, oh no, we need you to volunteer. I need you. We have a group called RSVP. Let me see if I can remember what it stands for. Retired Seniors Who Volunteer for Programs, I believe it's what it stands for. And they're critical to our success in the elementary schools, critical. And they're starting to work in both the middle and high schools as well. Everybody has a part to play. Everybody has to care because it's part of the regional economy.
Thank you. And the last citizen question would be, what is your vision of a K through 12 curriculum that is fully integrated with technology, such as smart boards in the classroom, et cetera, to supplement instruction?
Technology has been one of my big pushes in the district since I arrived. It was a big push in Greenfield. Also, one of my learning experiences was launching the first Massachusetts Virtual Academy in Greenfield. That was a real eye-opener for me, both financially as a funding challenge, let's just say, as well as the technological platform that had to be in place for students to work virtually. My work with MIT, my work in Greenfield, my work specifically now in Pittsfield we've just loaded a ton of equipment, but equipment is not the answer. It's the PD that goes with the equipment, and then it's the implementation of that equipment and how it's being used. I'm not a believer in technology for technology's sake, just to say we have it. I'm a believer in utilizing it and utilizing it to teach kids how to get into the 21st century. Researching skills, easy access, memorization. We don't need memorization except for automaticity for fluency. Beyond that, we can look almost anything up we want at any given moment. So, sort of inspiring kids to know how to use it and what to do with it and how to have access to it, and making sure that they're prepared to do that next thing. They're going to be expected to use it when they get out into the workforce.
Thank you, Tracy.
Mr. Chairman, I got a follow-up question, please.
Yes, Mr. Nordquist?
My question, how would you organize this district curriculum-wise so you can guarantee student achievement improvement?
I'm sorry, Mr. Nordquist, I didn't hear the beginning
Would you
part.
organize this district curriculum-wise so you can guarantee student achievement improvement? Follow to his curriculum question.
Again, it would be vertical and horizontal alignment across the two towns. I would be making sure that the same quality education in one building was the same for another. I would make sure that what we're finding in Pittsfield, and I would guess that most districts are going to figure this out pretty quickly if they haven't already done so, is that it's imperative, because of the lack of funding that we have right now in school systems, and you're not the only ones, there's lots of school systems that are suffering budgetary-wise. There has to be a way to get double doses in a period of time. So, for example, one of our district-determined measures that we piloted this year was writing to text, and we used biology. So we have English teachers and biology teachers working together to use one assessment to measure two different things. But what we got as a byproduct, which was fabulous, was the fact that the biology teachers said, wow, you do word walls? I'm going to start doing a word wall. That's great. What a great idea. The English teacher said, oh, you're looking for more technical writing? I can do more technical writing. So the dialogue and the byproduct of those interchanges has been something that we weren't really expecting necessarily, but it's been a great byproduct to see. But it's the vertical and horizontal alignment and then the continuum. One of the concerns that I always have, I have a number of schools that are over 90% low income. So we're doing a lot of interventions. But what about the student that's ready to roll and accelerate? So we've built in platforms that allows them to individualize and personalize their instruction that a teacher can launch immediately with online tools. That's one of the reasons for the technology. It allows that differentiation with individual students. So that vertical and horizontal alignment, consistency and uniformity.
Thank you. Final questions will come from committee member Mr. Vincent Cludia.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So you've answered the questions in great depth, and I appreciate that. So a lot of my questions have been answered, but I still have a few that I'd like to run by you. But if they're redundant, just do your best. There are a lot of different stakeholders, and this has been brought up, in education. It's not just the teachers, the principals, the administrators, the students, their parents. But there's that whole other segment, and you spoke to it, people who had children in the system, and they no longer have children or grandchildren in the system. And that segment doesn't necessarily know what goes on a day-to-day basis within our school systems. They don't know the success stories, you know, and the setbacks. What methods would you use to keep the public at large informed of those success stories and those setbacks in the district, so that when it comes to things like transparency and budgeting, that they get a better knowledge and understanding of what we're trying to accomplish?
Well, I can give you an example of what we did in Greenfield to accomplish that, and then, because Pittsfield's much larger, so it's probably not a good parallel necessarily, because we have vehicles for that in Pittsfield. But we have people that actually go out to the senior centers, for example. That's one way that we get our RSVP people into the building. But we actually formalized that. We actually went out into the community and set up meet and greets or coffees or popcorn nights, pizza nights. We did things that we were going out and sharing what we could do where they were, as opposed to trying to get them to come to us. Because what we found is that if we had to make them come to us, they frequently didn't. We'd be sitting there with our popcorn and pizza and no guests. So we started going out to them.
Okay.
We did that in the community a number of times, and once that got known, we started finding people coming in. But we sort of consciously recruited people from the community. We went into the businesses and asked people to come and just meet and talk to us and see how they could be part of the change process, that we were doing a revitalization of the school system, and we wanted them to be part of it. We wanted them to have a voice, but we wanted them to be part of the solution as well.
Great, thank you. Share with us, if you would, your responsibilities that you currently have as Deputy Superintendent in Pittsfield.
Ooh. That's
Reader's
a
Digest.
long list.
Reader's Digest.
So in a city system, there is a superintendent, and then there's a deputy, and they're somewhat interchangeable sometimes, but they usually divvy up roles. So the superintendent certainly works directly with the school committee, but the deputy works with the subcommittees of the school committee. So I'm in charge of both policy and curriculum subcommittees. I have one tomorrow night, which reminds me. The other varied things, I'm in charge of home school education, for example. I review all of the home ed plans for the students who choose, for a variety of reasons, to be homeschooled. I am in charge of all transfers. I am in charge of all complaints from parents, teachers, principals, staff, anybody come to my office. I'm in charge of all field trips. I'm in charge of student safety. I'm the civil rights officer. I'm in charge of all PD. I supervise, I forget, it's about 30 staff probably. I'm in charge of all coordinators and principals. I'm in charge of 21st Century. I'm in charge of grants. Did I miss anything? I probably did, but there's a lot. It's a catch-all kind of office in many ways. I work with principals directly, is what I spent most of my time working with the principals directly on the needs of their buildings, and I'm in charge of data. I work with the data coordinator for the district as well as the data teams in each of the buildings. I'm not in charge of each of those data teams, but I facilitate those meetings during August.
And I think you said you're also on the team that builds the budget.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But we're all on that team. That's a big team.
I'm sure.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I also approve all expenditures for principals, other than foundation money.
Okay. So why at this point in your career do you want to leave Pittsfield?
Because I'm ready to be at the helm. I'm ready to lead a district. I feel strongly that everything I've done up until this point has led me to this juncture. I really do. I think that the work is good in Pittsfield. The work was good in Greenfield. The work was good in Marblehead. But I'm ready to take on a challenge, and I specifically sought out a challenge.
What would you consider to be one of your greatest strengths? And conversely, what would you consider to be one of your greatest growth opportunities?
I'll start with my growth opportunity first. I like to end on a high note. I think my growth opportunity is patience. I feel such an urgency for students. We say sometimes, this is the year, and I say, no, today is the day, because today is the day, because if you don't start with today, the year doesn't happen. So I feel this sense of urgency, I guess. And I sometimes have to rein myself back a little bit because I want results. I need results, and I want results now. My staff will tell you that, undoubtedly. My strength, I think I have an incredibly good sense of humor. I've learned to have that over the course of years. But I think my strength is that I have an eclectic background, which I think some people might see as sort of a fault, maybe, but I see it as a huge strength because I've had, as I said, an opportunity to have all these experiences that have really prepared me, I think, for this role. I've had a variety of chances to test my wits in a variety of circumstances, and I'm grateful for all of those.
Okay. Spencer East Brookfield District is two communities, relatively small communities, and communications is very, very important. There's a board of 7 that on the school committee. How would you keep that board informed on a regular basis, given the fact that the rumor mill goes much faster than technology these days? So that when we're walking out of a restaurant or church, we're not being
Right.
grabbed and said, hey, did you hear what happened at school? How do you keep the school committee just abreast of what's going on?
Well, I have a committee of 7 right now, includes the mayor, and the mayor's office certainly doesn't like surprises, nor do any of the other members, nor does the superintendent for that matter. So we're constantly keeping each other apprised of what's going on. If we have an ambulance arrive at a school, student fell off the playground, broken arm, students transported, I get that call. Oh, that's another thing I do. I take the safety calls and the emergency calls. So the first thing I do is a FIPO, for information purposes only. You don't need to do anything, but I want to make you aware. Yes, we do have an accident. Here's what it was. So when you hear the rumor that someone died, they've already been pronounced dead. It's a false statement because it's true that it does happen. The rumor mill goes pretty quickly. We had, quite frankly, a shooting the week before school started in the city, and it was 2 students, one 14, one 17. It was something that no one necessarily could have predicted, but it left a pretty big mark, and we were in lockdown while I was doing the new teacher orientation. We went into lockdown. I called the lockdown when, as soon as we came out of lockdown, I sent a message and said, we got to let the school committee know because they're going to not necessarily know, but they're going to hear sirens, and they're not going to know it has anything to do with the school. And before anything gets out, because reporters are already there and reporters have now gone to the emergency room, I want to get the right message to the right people now. That's an example of how we are pretty, it's sometimes just for your information, and sometimes it's for information purposes only. I don't need you to do anything. I just need you to be aware so that if someone asks you, we can dispel whatever, other statements might be out there. The other thing is that we have regular conversations with the school committee chair. The superintendent meets with her on a weekly basis. She meets with me sometimes about subcommittee, because she chairs one of the subcommittees. I meet with the other member because she chairs the other subcommittee, and we talk about what might be on the horizon. We also talk at school committee meetings because we don't want to violate open meeting laws, but if we need people to know something pretty quickly, we're not going to deliberate it through email, which would be a violation, but we want to get the information out. We want to make sure that they know, and we're pretty forthcoming with that information quickly.
Great, thank you. Is there anything in your personal or professional life that may distract from the goals of the district of educating our students that this board should know about prior to us awarding the new superintendent position?
Not that I can think of. I've never been asked that before. But the answer is no, I believe.
Thank you. And my final question. Tell us and the people that are going to be viewing this why you're the right person for this job.
Well, I think I'm the right person because I have that eclectic background. I have the special ed experience. I have the technology experience. I have the desire to face the challenge. I think that everything I've done, as I said, everything has led me to this point. Everything has led to this path. And it's pretty clear to me that, you know, I'm poised for this, and I'm ready to take on the helm of a district. I feel the urgency for students. I feel an obligation to the state. I sit on urban superintendents every month, and I listen to the other cities, the other 25 cities, talk about their challenges. They're not unlike the challenges of the suburbs in many ways. It's just that the cities get more attention because they have these, you know, really, really, really concentrated groups of students in the cities. But the suburbs have the same issues, and I'm ready to take those on. I've taken those on in Pittsfield, I took those on in Greenfield, and I'm ready to take them on in Spencer East Brookfield.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vinnie. Tracy, would you like to take a couple of minutes and give us a closing statement or share?
Yes, I would. I just want to thank the audience for coming. Your commitment here tonight tells me that there's a community that cares about the kids here and cares about the educational policies that are going to be set and the future of the system. I think it's important for the general viewing audience to know that as well. I'm excited about this possibility. I do hope I am your candidate of choice. I'm looking forward to the challenge. I'm looking forward to working with you. I met some really great people tonight that I hope I'll be working. I really do. I hope to work with you because they gave each other kudos, and that's a really good sign to me that they care about each other and they respect each other's work. I want to be in one of those districts. I want to be in a district that cares about being a model for others. I think if Spencer East Brookfield puts their mind to it and their hearts to it, I don't think there's anything that it can't do as a district. I think it will take the community. I think it may take the region. I would welcome the opportunity to see if that's the case, certainly. But I think it is going to take hard work. I think it is going to take grit, but that's exactly what we tell our students. It takes grit and perseverance, so we should be a model for that. I think that if Spencer East Brookfield puts their heads into this game, I think that it can turn it around and be a model for the other systems that are going to be going through the same exact things in the years to come, because budget is going to be a consistent problem for many districts. We hear this all over the state. We're not the only ones in Pittsfield, and you're not the only ones in Spencer. But let's fix it, and then let's be the model for others. Thank you.
Tracy, thank you very much on behalf of the committee and the communities of Spencer and East Brookfield for having an interest in coming to this district. We are going to take a 10-minute recess, and then the committee is going to reconvene into open session, and we're going to discuss where we go from here. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much.
Well, I think we have a lot to be proud of with the candidates that were brought forward to us from the subcommittee. I think we had two great candidates that we listened to for the last two nights. Now the chair needs some direction. I need to know what the board wants to do in regards to site interviews and where you want to go from here. Does anybody have any? Vinnie?
Mr. Chairman, I agree with you wholeheartedly. We've been very fortunate to have two excellent candidates as finalists for this position, and I would make a motion that we move expeditiously and set up site visits for both candidates, and we also start the background checks if those are not already in progress for both candidates.
Okay. I received the background check information by email today, and I was told that that stuff was mailed out yesterday to both the candidates. So that should be en route. So we have a motion from you to set up the site visits. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Mr. Nordquist. Any further discussion on that? I guess the chair's question would be, when are members available? Because we're probably going to have difficulty getting this scheduled on a fast track where everybody can go. So we may have to just pick a date or a time, and those that can make it, fine. And
Mr.
Kurt.
Chairman, I have a question. I don't think we should do both site visits in the same day because you're going to be rushing around, and I like to go to when the school's open. And I don't think there's possibility we could do both in the same day.
Yeah.
So I would think that we have 2 separate days.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be doing both in the same.
Well, I just brought that up, so.
Right, okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think we ought to try to get them this week, though.
Okay.
I'm concerned, obviously, these candidates that have been, presented to us are also candidates elsewhere. And I don't want to drag our feet and, take our time in this process. I think now we need to act, and we need to do it wisely, but I think we need to do it quickly.
Okay. Before we take a vote, and if the board doesn't mind, I'd like to ask Dr. Malvey, do you have any input on this, Dr. Malvey, regards to the site interviews and how quickly it should be done, or?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to congratulate the committee for what I thought was an excellent interview on both candidates. Having been a candidate throughout my career, but also observed many, many interviews, I thought your questions were on target, polite, and it was a professionally done total interview. But with respect to the next steps, I would encourage you to move very, very quickly. I think if you're comfortable with both candidates, there's no need to wait. Things can change in a heartbeat, not only with the candidates, but with the committee and circumstances, et cetera, et cetera. So that if you're comfortable with candidate 1, candidate 2, having candidate 2, whatever that may be in your minds, you have to be comfortable with the fact that would you go with candidate 2 as a default candidate if candidate 1 were not to work out? So you're going to have to cross that bridge. I don't think you can make that decision based on the interviews alone. When you go forward to a candidate's place of work, you'll get, I think, honest opinions, and you'll also get a mixed review. Not everyone always praises the candidate leaving a district, but I think that they'll give you an honest reflection of what their professional responsibilities were, any issues that may have come about, and how they have been resolved. And no one is crystal clear. Trust me, no one is crystal clear, but there are also turf issues that I think the committee now understands that there are things that happen on a daily, weekly, monthly basis that may be a little bit differently from what the public sees. So I think that's very, very helpful. But I would strongly urge you to move forward on both candidates because I don't think either one of them will be on the block very, very long.
Thank you. Any members have any questions for Dr. Malvey in regards to what we've witnessed for the past 2 nights? Okay, thank you, Dr. Malvey. So we have Vinnie's motion and seconded by Kurt. Having heard what we just heard, the chair would start tomorrow and see if we could get something set up with either one of the candidates for Thursday and then another one for Friday. I know Monday is a holiday, probably looking at Tuesday for the next week, and I'll keep everybody informed, and hopefully we can all go, or if not, if we want to put it on fast track, we'll get, if it's a Thursday or a Friday, those that can go will go. And we do have 2 of the principals that will be coming with us. Joyce Nelson will be coming with us, and Linda Standard will be coming with us as well. And Adam Cadet, the town administrator from Spencer, will be coming with us, and I also reached out to the selectmen from the town of East Brookfield, and the chairman responded back, and there was no interest or availability time-wise for any of the East Brookfield selectmen to come. So we do have some other folks that are willing to come along with us and help us with the process. So having said that, then we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Oh, I have sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Angela.
2 things. One is if a majority of people are going, don't we have to post that? And how long do we have to post that?
Martha will take care of all that. She'll make sure we have the proper posting and stuff, yeah.
Right, so we're not talking Thursday, right? I mean, that's 48 hours. That means if we're talking Friday at the earliest, right?
Well, only if 4 members were going to go on Thursday, would it be too late?
Well, you know, we're going to have to work with this schedule. If we want to put it on fast track, there's a lot of people that have to be put together in both of these places. If we run into a problem as far as open meeting...
Well, I guess my point is...
Excuse me. If we run into a problem as far as open meeting violations, then we may have to limit it as far as school committee members to there's 3 members going, along with the 2 principals and the town administrator. So we'll work that out.
That was my point, yeah.
You had another question?
No, that was it.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Is there any other business? Mr. Cludier?
Mr. Chairman, so with that said, if we have the possibility of setting one up for Thursday, possibly Friday, if not maybe Tuesday, I really think we ought to post a meeting for the school committee next Tuesday evening, at the very latest Thursday evening of next week, or post them both and we'll cancel one, just so that we have them available so that this board can reconvene. And I don't know what people's availability is on Tuesday and Thursday of next week, and maybe that's a better question.
Right. I think that's a good point. If we're going to fast track this as far as the site interviews, I think we need to be prepared to come back here next week and make a decision. So we do have to do that. What is the availability of members?
I can do Tuesday or Thursday.
Tuesday or Thursday? Kurt?
I can do any day except Tuesdays.
Anyone but Tuesday.
Correct.
We're talking about night now, Tuesday night school committee meeting.
Tuesday nights?
Yeah, we're talking about
For
night.
meeting.
Oh, for meeting, no problem.
No problem for Tuesday or Thursday?
Correct.
Okay. Mike?
I could do Tuesday or Thursday.
Okay. Vinnie?
Tuesday or Thursday?
Okay.
Okay, I will definitely consider it.
Heather, you're available?
Either day is fine.
Okay, all right, then that's what we'll plan on. I'll see what I can get set up for site visits, and we'll plan on, based on that, of having a school committee meeting either on Tuesday or Thursday.
So should we post both, and do you want them?
You might as well for the time being until we see where we're going, just so that we have the proper posting in place. Here, yep. Time-wise, what's best for folks, 6 o'clock? We'll stick with 6. Any other business to come before the committee?
No, at one of those sessions, I would suspect that we should possibly have a executive session to finish the contract that we'll be offering, because that is not complete as of this date.
Yeah.
As of this date, excuse me.
I agree. I think we should also contact school council and see if he can be here for that. I don't know if he's going to be back,
He'll be back on Monday, I'm
coming
told.
back on Monday.
We should probably get a phone call into him, because if we want him here for that, if it's going to be Tuesday, because he'll be coming off of vacay for a
Right.
week. I'm not sure what his schedule is going to be like.
Okay, all right. Would you want to contact Cheryl
certainly will.
tomorrow and facilitate that?
And for now, I'll just tell him it's either Tuesday or Thursday evening.
Right.
Okay.
Kurt?
Chairman, on the background checks, is that going to be after the site visit or be taking place? Who's going to do the background checks?
The background checks are going to be done by school counsel's firm. They've sent all the necessary paperwork out that has to be signed off, and I think it's the fastest way for us to go and the most...
I think it's the more legal way to do it. So.
Yeah.
Nope, I just want to know what was, yeah, thank you.
Martha?
Just a thought, but would the committee give any consideration, are you scheduled to have your second monthly meeting on October 21st? If you're going to be meeting next Tuesday on the 14th, did you want to devote that strictly to this, or did you want to do
Yeah.
the other business as well?
Yeah, I think we want to just stick to the superintendent issue for this meeting, yeah.
I agree.
Anything else? Maybe we should probably have a vote, a formal vote, a motion to have school council complete the whole background check process for us. They put the paperwork together and sent it out, but just to make sure we got all bases covered.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Cludier,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Nordquist. Dr. Malvy?
Point of clarification, are you referring to the reference check?
No, he's speaking of paperwork that has been sent out, giving permission for background credit checks, things of this nature.
Okay.
Corey checks.
All right, because typically, just as a HR procedure in the district, we do that in terms of the Corey check.
Okay.
If you're requesting these other things, then I understand that, but I also was looking at the reference checks.
Okay.
that candidates provided, and you also have the opportunity to ask candidates to submit other names and contact numbers that may not heretofore have been provided in their material.
Okay.
I want the committee to keep that in mind, too. And then if you wanted to, dole that out to the members, that should begin immediately.
Yeah. You had made a suggestion, Dr. Malvey, that we could do this at the administration office and do it with members that wanted to come and do it on speakerphone just to facilitate the process. Is that anything that members are interested in, or would you prefer to dole that responsibility out to individual members?
Mr. Chairman, just after
Nyquist.
there was a motion made and second, we got to vote on that first, I believe, but after that's done, well, let's do that first, and then I'll make a motion to have Dr. Melvey do what he can do as another motion.
Okay, motion by Mr. Cloutier to have school council do the background check, sent by Mr. Nyquist. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that Dr. Melvey do the Corey checks and any other checks he can do on our behalf and report back to us.
That's going to be with the school committee members that want to be present.
Correct.
Right, it'll be done, Dr.
I
Malvey?
would just ask that it not be a quorum
Yes, yep.
because of the nature of the inquiries.
Okay, all right. So perhaps members can send me an email, whatever, whoever's interested in participating in the reference check portion of this, and the chair will select 3 people that are willing to do that.
I guess the question would be, when are we going to do that? If we're attempting to set up site visits Thursday and Friday, I'm just not sure at what point. Monday's a holiday.
Right. Well, we may, those members that aren't able to go to site visits, I don't know that I'll be able to attend, but I certainly would be able to do this in administration office, and that's something that the superintendent, myself, and another member or 2 could be doing while folks are out at the site visit in order to move it along.
Fair enough. I agree. Okay.
So this motion by Kurt, seconded
Second.
by Vinnie. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Any other business to come before the board in regards to the superintendent's appointment?
Motion adjourned, Mr. Chairman.
Motion adjourned by Mr. Nyquist, seconded.
Second.
Mr. Cloutier, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, so voted. Thank you.